Another day and we're back here. The sorting has been going along quite well, actually. As soon as I started paying more attention to these specific boxes, the better I was at sorting everything together again. Most of the junk has been sorted by one of my interns. Thank you, Josh. Who was very not happy with me and is now dealing with the squirrel. Man, I'm happy about that. Alright. I've mostly been searching for cases that align with some of the things we've been seeing here, but I've been trying to keep reading just for the tape, so we'll see how well that goes. Without wasting any more time, shall we? Tape number 1, Master Collection, Ontario Paranormal Institute. Investigator 32 Accounting. Case file number 1, account of Trevor Dunkel regarding a home in his neighborhood that doesn't exist. Account begins. Hi, I'm a Trevor Dunkel. I'm not gonna get in trouble for this, am I? You can't, go to the cops with this? Because I didn't do anything. Well, yeah, we were trespassing, I guess, but, I didn't make my friends disappear. It wasn't me, it was the house, I swear. Okay, alright, I'll tell you everything, but you gotta promise me you're not gonna tell the cops. Or my mom. I don't want to think about this after today, okay? Alright, so there's this creepy old house at the end of the block that kids always called the Nowhere House. Because we always used to go there, and when our parents asked, we said we went nowhere. Good, whatever. It's never had anyone living there. My parents said there used to be a family there, but we've never seen anything, so the kids in the neighborhood would sometimes go in there and hang out, dare each other to go places in the house, that sort of thing. Anyway, that's how we lost Dan. We were in Nowhere House, and it was getting late. My parents never minded if I was out super late, so long as I texted them and let them know I was okay. And some of the other kids were just sneaking out. Anyway, Danny had been saying that he kept seeing shadow people in the house all day, so at about midnight we dared him to spend some time in the basement alone. We were making fun of him, and he looked real scared, but he did it. 1 a.m. cave-in. No Danny. The other kids got bored and left, but I was worried, so I went to the basement and couldn't find him. Next day, after my volunteer shift at the library, I went by his house to see if maybe he'd snuck out or something. But his parents gave me weird looks and acted like they didn't know me. When I asked about Danny, they said they didn't know a Danny. I checked my phone for pictures of me and Dan, and all the ones I had didn't have Dan in them anymore. Text chats I had only had my parts in them. I got freaked out and ran back to Nowhere House to see the other kids, but they were the same. Some of them made fun of me, and some of them looked like they thought I was going nuts, so I dropped it. Now, I didn't drop it, you know? Dan taught me how to skate. We'd known each other since grade 5. I wasn't going to let people pretend he wasn't around. So I told everybody I was going to stay at the house late tonight just to see if I could. Dana and Rob said they wanted to, too, so there we were at almost midnight, playing party games on our phones. Dana asked what was really going on with this Danny guy I mentioned earlier, and I got a little pissed. Dana and Dan had gone out for a while a summer ago, but they may not have been close anymore. But, there's no way she'd forget him, right? But at this point, though, I was pretty sure something weird was going on, so I made them swear not to think I was nuts, and I told them the whole story. That's really when the weird stuff happened. Because Dana and Rob started to sort of remember Dan, and it looked like it hurt. Rob looked like he might puke, and Dana was rubbing her temples like she had a headache. The more I said, the worse they got, but they did remember him, so when I finished the story, they were super freaked out that they had forgotten him. and then they saw them. Just like Danny, the two of them said they were starting to see shadow people peeking out from the house's rooms. What? Oh, yeah, well, we got out of there all right. No way I was letting that place get another one of my friends. We all made it home, so I thought that was done for the night. But no, of course not, right? Rob sent me some texts at 12:50 a.m. I remember because they were texts. Real scared about all the shadows in his house. He said his mom and dad weren't listening to him, but he could see Danny there, and so I booked it over to Rob's place and rang the bell as fast as I could. His parents opened the door looking real confused. The place was a mess, too, and I asked if everything was all right, and they said they think a burglar might have been inside, but they'd been home all night and hadn't seen anything. They might have asked why I was out past 1 a.m., too, but I had looked at my phone and all Rob's texts were gone. I knew what I had to do after that. I had to fill Dana in on who Rob was, but it was easier after Danny, so she was with me. She was scared, though. She kept seeing those shadow guys everywhere and said she could see Danny and Rob now, too, trying to keep her away from the dark places. That night, I got some gas from my dad's garage and met Dana by the Nowhere house. She said Rob and Danny were really scared and were waving us off, but she was still with me. We got around as fast as we could and poured the gas everywhere. We wanted to get it done well before midnight, you know. But every time I tried to light it, the flame went out. Dana had to do it for me. Guess I was clumsy with the lighter. Anyway, the whole place goes up. Huge whoosh of fire, and suddenly this buzzing starts like angry bees, but way lower. And then it kept getting higher and higher pitch until we couldn't take it and we bolted. We were sure someone would have seen the fire, but we didn't even see a fire truck the rest of the night. Nothing on the news, nothing on the local message boards, nothing. We were pretty relieved, but Dana was still scared, so I told her I'd stay up with her just in case. And around the same time as Rob, at 12:50 a.m., I got a call. I could hear buzzing and Dana screaming, so I got over there as fast as I could. She lived closer to me than Rob had, so I got there in time to see them. Hundreds of shadow people. Man, I mean really, a huge crowd, all clustered in around Dana's place. Her parents were scared, and it looked like they couldn't see the things, but they knew Dana was scared. Her mom was on the phone with what must have been 911. Her dad was trying to hold her to keep her from bolting and smashing stuff in the kitchen. Dana saw me and screamed at me to run. I saw Danny and Rob pushing on the figures closing in. And then I saw the microwave clock hit 13 a.m. for just a split second. For just that little moment, everything stopped. I saw Danny and Rob crying, saw Dana screaming, and I saw one of those things reach out and touch Dana's head. And that was it. Next second, the clock read 1 a.m. The shadow people were gone, and so was Danny, Rob, and Dana. Dana's parents looked like they had just woken up from a dream, wondering about the damage in their house, why they had been crying. They didn't even notice me leaving. That house stayed gone, by the way. The grounds looked like the house had even stood there for decades. No one notices my friends are gone. Their parents don't remember. Why do I remember them? Never mind, I don't want an answer. I don't want to think about this anymore. I keep hearing them, you know? End of account. Wow. These shadow reports are always so emotional, it's hard to read them. I was open to the idea that the story of the house on Dead Man's Lane that I read a couple of weeks ago was true, but I hadn't thought that it was possibly connected to the shadow entities and ensuing disappearances. But this follows in line with the other stories to a T. I can verify that Trevor Dunkel exists, that he lived where the account claims he lived. 10 years ago, he was a high school senior and lost 3 of his friends who, according to my extremely thorough research, never existed. Trevor, holding to his sentiments from the interview, refused to speak about the events, claiming that years of therapy have disabused him of any thoughts of imaginary friends he might have had. I'm pretty sure he doesn't believe that, but I decided it's best to let the kid be. He's had enough, I think. Going back to the account, it lines up with Violet's story in a very specific bit, the clock reaching 13 a.m. Aside from why Trevor could witness the event without falling victim or forgetting afterwards like everyone else is beside the point, that this is yet another clue as to the nature of the phenomenon. I'm starting to think these entities can only operate or exert influence in non-material ways, and perhaps an hour that doesn't exist is just the right time for them to render someone, well, non-existent. The location described in the stories indeed had a house there in the early 90s, which had been abandoned in the 60s at some point. Curiously, the house seems to have been abandoned when the former owners left, as though they sold the place to people that don't exist. I followed that hunch, and the local library held copies of public tax records, which list a string of owners, right up until the home was torn down in 1994. That this library, the very same one that Trevor volunteered at when he was a teenager, held information about people that do not exist, is helping me prove a theory as to why my own records aren't blank about this phenomenon. I'll need a little more time to work on a solid piece about that before I go on, though. I'm storing this with the other shadow kidnapping accounts in a file I've labeled, They Who Are Not There. I wonder if there's any way we could save people taken by these things. Alright. The next one is a tad bit longer. It's a real treat, to be honest. I'm surprised to have found it in my accounts. Let's start it up, shall we? Once again, tape number 1. Case file number 1. Account of Guillaume Dabé about the dancing plague that affected his small town in the summer of 1518. Account begins. I, Brother Guillaume, commit to record the events of the summer of 1518 that led to the complete destruction of my village. Let its name and the horrors within fade from memory. It shall take several pages to record these events for the bishop in Alsace. So this humble servant shall begin. May God grant me the strength to recount the horrors I witnessed. It began, I was told, in a village called Strasbourg. The calamities of the plague had for years worn the people ragged, and one day the folk there simply began to dance, as though they might shake off the dread and malaise from sheer will. This quickly became something of a local marvel, and news spread far and wide. Visitors from as far away as the Holy Vatican had already made their way to see the dancing sickness when it finally started branching out to other towns in the area. My village was infected in mid-August. The orphans of Henri and Abeline being recently in my care after the unfortunate deaths of their parents, God rest their souls, had been led out to play in the square. I was told to come see to my wards, as they had begun dancing, and not responding to any attempts to assuage them. As I beheld the small figures dancing in the square, I noticed the townfolk avoided them with looks of fear in their eyes. I was one of the elder brethren of the small abbey there, and so I strode up to the children to do my duty and put their fears to rest. "Good people," I said, "be not afraid. The children just wish to lighten all of our spirits. They see our troubles, and more than many of us have felt the Reaper's touch. Come, let us revel in this lovely day as the children do." At my words and my confidence, the townfolk became calmed, and with cautious smiles, some joined in the dancing. I had a mind to do the same, to further lead by example. However, before I did, I touched the shoulder of young Alain, who was dancing with his sister. The child gazed up at me then and gave me the most frightening grin I had ever seen. I knew then that I had made a grave error, as the people dancing all took on the same evil disposition. I hope I can be forgiven for my part in the spreading of the sickness. The first journal entry finishes here. The next page picks up about a week later. Either some pages are missing, or this was the next time Brother Guillaume was able to write. Account continues. Apologies for the lack of diligence in recording events. My recovery is progressing, albeit slowly. I fear the harm done to me may never fully heal. I return now to my accounting. It was the second week of folks dancing, and I am sad to report that the young orphans had already joined their mother and father. The townsfolk seemed blissfully unbothered by the two children collapsing, smiles still straining their small faces. I asked for help burying them, and was met by cheerful laughter. The miller, who was mid-jig, suggested that it was fine to leave them as they lay, and that I should smile to keep my spirits up. It was then that I began seeing them, God save me. I know now that these were not but demons, walking in the guise of men, but at the time I marked many new visitors in the village. Many smiling folk were gathered watching and standing with the townsfolk, I knew, though they themselves were not dancing. These strangers never acknowledged my presence more than a smiling nod, and my neighbors never seemed to notice them, nor did they understand to whom I referred when I asked about the smiling visitors. I admit I thought that more to do with the village's delirious state than anything sinister, but my ignorance was soon dispelled. I was bringing water to those who had finally collapsed from their macabre dance, when I cast my gaze hopelessly upon the square full of cavorting neighbors. As usual, they were joined by their smiling, unmoving partners. I had come to regard them as some sort of specter, some hanging dread. Perhaps the scholars were correct, and these were truly the signs of the end times. But I say now that this is wrong. As surely as I know these smiling creatures are not signs of the end, I know also that we will endure. I know this because I have seen what these creatures do, and I know that Armageddon could not be worse. For as I watched the movements of Heidi, a local milkmaid, her smiling partner leant in as if to share a kiss. As soon as their lips touched, Heidi ceased her dance. Any movement at all, in fact. The stranger began to pull away from Heidi then, and in so doing distended his lips into a long band. Heidi began to convulse, her eyes rolling back into her head, and when her partner finally released her, she dropped to the ground stone dead. The creature then turned his grinning gaze to me, and I admit to no small amount of fear, producing my cross and shouting at the creature before it simply moved off and joined another person in the crowd. These things were not specters, nor God's will to punish us poor sinners. They are truly a devilry, some new blight upon us. I pray we face no other calamity as frightful as the smile. End of account. It's certainly much harder to verify accounts as old as this one reportedly is, but this definitely seems to be referring to the smile entities that we've heard about once before. The other details are more or less able to be confirmed. In the summer of 1518, in what was then the Holy Roman Empire, a dancing plague erupted in the area of Alsace. Experts believe it was a social response to many years of calamity that had befallen the population, such as the plague. As for the specific town, Brother Guillaume was correct. That record of it would be expunged. But I did find a map made in 1510, which shows a small village to the north of Strasbourg that is not there in later maps. Could be a coincidence, but it certainly helps the veracity of the account. The pages themselves were more difficult to parse. I wasn't even sure Guillaume was talking about the smile phenomenon until the second page, but what made this really difficult was the calligraphy. I'm not a medieval scholar, so I'm definitely not used to reading handwriting, but I was very shocked to see it was written in English. Or so I thought. I sent it down to a lab downtown to verify its age, and they confirmed that it was written around the time it's reported to have been in. Not only that, but photos taken for posterity show the language is written in is definitely a dialect of medieval French, with some church Latin thrown in. I don't know either language, so I'm stumped as to why it appears to be written in modern English when I read it. I need to do some more tests. Okay, so I got one of my co-workers to look at the paper, and they confirmed it appeared to be written in modern English. To make things weirder, when I pull out my phone and look at the page through my photo app, and I see it in medieval French. There's more to this account than just the smile, and I have one more clue. Every page of this account is numbered 1. I'm going to start a new file on this phenomenon for sure. One final addendum. There was actually 16 more pages included in this account that appear to have been written before the words on the first pages. And I had read into record anyway. I didn't include them because while written in the same hand as Brother Guillaume, they were definitely not in English. I may not speak French well, but I do remember a few words. All 16 pages have repeatedly been scrawled with a single word. French for smile. Sourire. 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 Smile. Alright, I popped in a fresh tape for this one. Tape number 1, Master Collection, Ontario Paranormal Institute. Investigator 32 accounting. Case file number 1, account of Investigator 32, Ontario Paranormal Institute, on the theorized existence of a documenting entity. Account begins. Alright, as this is my own account, I'm doing this more for posterity than anything else. I have noticed over the last couple of weeks instances of strange occurrences relating to the accounting of strange events. Not the events themselves, though those are strange on their own, but the recording of these events itself being strange. Whether in the original recording or in my own recording of them onto these tapes, a strangeness to the order and language used is noticeable. I'm not done with my own investigation into this phenomenon, but for the record, the following events are currently under my scrutiny. 1. The ability to record instances of they who are not there when every other instance of record is erased after a victim seems to be taken. 2. The ability for this investigator to read untrained languages. 3. The instances of the number 1 appearing wherever the phenomenon can be discerned. I'm not at all sure of what this thing is, but I'm starting to believe it's not just some coincidence or strangeness leaking in from verifiable reports of the supernatural. So far, it hasn't proved harmful, just the opposite, actually. Though I'm not willing to trust anything of this nature at all, I'm not sure what I can really do about it without more data. I suppose I'll have to keep looking for clues and add to this investigation as I get them.